Sweeney with the Hart Leadership Program. I'm here to introduce you to fellow Duke alumnus Brandon Busteed, who graduated from Duke in 1999 and went on to become the Executive Director of Education at Gallup. I was really excited to meet Brandon because I knew that he had a really non-traditional path after he graduated from Duke. He didn't do the typical iBanking consulting, go to law school thing that many Duke graduates fell into then and still fall into now. What he did instead was work in sales for a short while and then went on to manage his own educational company that worked to reduce the rates of binge drinking and sexual assault on college campuses. I also wanted to learn why he was passionate about education specifically and how he liked living and working in Washington, D.C. So stay tuned because Brandon has some really valuable advice for both current college students and recent graduates.
So right now I'm the Executive Director for Gallup's Education Division, and so I lead all of our work we do relevant to education across K-12 and higher ed. I've been here about a year and a half and spent the last 12 years before that building an online education company called Outside the Classroom. So they've obviously been different roles. One, I was an entrepreneur, CEO. Here, I'm a leader, but working inside of a much larger organization. And I would say there's been a couple things that have been really fundamental to my career. I remember always the focus on synthesizing complex issues and information into really simple points, right? So all the memo writing activity that I remember doing in public policy, that has been a huge help because that's essentially what I've done in my entire career is think about complex issues, go through a ton of data on these things, right? Data that could tell you this way, that way, and everything in between. And at the end of it all, you kind of have to make sense of it. You have to simplify really complex issues and make a compelling case. So that exercise, which was kind of critical as I remember all of my educational experiences, has been really a huge boost to the success I've had in my career. And I also remember how great the faculty were. I mean, public policy and the Hart Leadership Program especially has a disproportionate number of faculty who just care about students. Alma Blunt and Tony Brown, all these people, Bruce Payne, they gave time outside the classroom. They were always available. And that's actually a rarity today, right? It's probably even a rarity across the rest of Duke. But they actually got, they took time to get to know me. And if there was one exercise that was one of the most important things I did, I remember Alma giving us an assignment to write a paper on our purpose in life. And so to have thought about that, it was the toughest assignment I've ever had to do, but to have thought about that as an undergraduate and to really carefully zero in on, what is my purpose in life? Even if I didn't know what it was, right, and I'm still shaping that in some ways over time, engaging in that kind of high-level thought process was just critical because it helped me understand that, I want a job where I'm able to do good and do well all the time. I'll never do one without the other. So I'll never work in a nonprofit where I don't have a chance to make money, and I'm never going to take a job that's just about money. I have to be connected to social passion, to purpose, to stuff that I want to do in my life, to making an impact in the world. And while I'm doing it, I'd love to be able to make some money too. So I'm never going to settle for anything other than the combination of those two things.
Why have you devoted your life to improving educational outcomes?
So it's a great question. I mean, to be truthful, if you had asked me that question as a student at Duke, even in my senior year, I probably wouldn't have said that I was going to be spending my career in the education field, and I have. And but obviously, it's not a surprise too if I think about it on the other hand, because I got very involved as a student at Duke. I got involved in a lot of student leadership activities. All my heroes and mentors in my life were teachers or faculty members, and so to think about the value that education had in my life, and to also look at the backdrop of everything that's changing in education right now, global competition, technology, just basic questions about the value of an education. I mean, all of this is in upheaval right now. So it's easily the most exciting time in the world to be involved in education, and probably the most important time to be involved in it. We have to get it right. Our whole future is bet on this. So I kind of fell into it, though. I mean, it wasn't a traditional pathway. I started an organization, a company, about 6 months after I graduated from Duke that was in the education space, and that was it. So ever since then, I've been involved in the education field, now in 2 different for-profit organizations that focus on education, and it's been incredibly rewarding. I think far too many college students, especially at a place like Duke where you have a lot of super achievers, They think that there's this traditional path, or just a handful of traditional paths that they go down, and they go down them, they're very successful at them, they get good grades, they graduate, they get a quote-unquote great job, and then they wake up one day not too soon after that and realize they're not doing what they love to do, and they're not doing what they're best at, which is just an incredible tragedy. And in fact, Gallup just reported on findings like this, that college graduates are the least engaged in the workplace of anybody by educational attainment. So that's actually the opposite of what we would expect. You think college graduates are way more engaged than everybody else. And the reality is that I think we've kind of lost track of being very conscientious about what we want, what we love to do, and what we're best at. College and all the classes we go through may not exactly give us that experience. So finding great teachers, faculty members, mentors, asking them their advice on what they think you're best at, asking them about what they think you should do. I got very non-traditional advice when I was at Duke. I asked Tony Brown one day what I should do, and he said, you should go into sales. He's like, it's the fastest path to management, and you'd be great at it. Now think about that. I don't know one college graduate from Duke that's thinking about going into a sales job, right? And but it was incredible advice, and I thought about that. I went down that path for a very short while before I started my company, and in reality, any great successful entrepreneur is a salesperson. So it was fantastic advice, but it wasn't the kind of advice that was the traditional norm and standard of going to consulting, going to investment banking, go to law school, kind of the traditional paths. So you have to be really careful and listen to your own gut instinct and ask for advice from people who know you pretty well. The most important thing in thinking about a career path, especially when you're younger, is a lot of college graduates or soon-to-be college graduates, when I hear them talking about the kind of jobs they're looking for, they're sorting those jobs on what I would say are the wrong criteria, right? How much money do I make? What are the benefits? Is there a signing bonus? Is it a brand name company or organization? And they get very caught up on those things, which at the end of the day are very unimportant in the grand scheme of them being successful. Probably the most important thing you can ask is, who's my manager? And are they somebody who cares about my development? And this is actually real stuff that Gallup has studied, so it obviously rings true in terms of the work I'm doing now. But the best thing I can say is find a great mentor, find a great manager. I don't care what kind of organization or company it is. Someone may have no idea what the name of it is, what it does. But if you have a great manager who cares about you as a person, if it's a workplace, it's a highly engaged workplace, that's worth its weight in gold. So, I would say definitely consider non-traditional pathways, definitely consider something interesting and kind of off the beaten path. In fact, I think it's riskier to go down the traditional path than it is to explore some of these things outside those domains, and even something like entrepreneurship, whether it's social entrepreneurship or a for-profit company. It's interesting because most entrepreneurs are necessity entrepreneurs. They start a company because there wasn't any other job. And there's a little bit of that element right now with a bad economy, right? I mean, there's plenty of Duke students thinking about starting companies because of an opportunity. There's probably a few who might think about it because they don't see anything great for themselves, so they're going to create their own job. So I'm a huge advocate for those non-traditional paths, and I think it really is, though, about if you're going to take a job working in an organization, the number one thing to evaluate is that manager. Are they going to be a great mentor? Are they going to help you grow? And if you can say confidently yes to that, that's a home run. One of the best things about being at Gallup is that we're sitting on the world's largest research platform, right? We're surveying 98% of the world's population on an annual basis through the World Poll. The nightly poll, we're interviewing a representative sample of Americans. One of the research studies that I just worked on with Gallup in the last couple of months actually looked at young Americans ages 18 to 35. We were interested in what kinds of experiences they had in school or in college that would be predictive of their success in the workplace. And so we were looking at all kinds of 21st century skill development exposure that they had in their last year of school. So we asked if they used technology to complete an assignment, if they worked in teams, did they present publicly, all sorts of elements like that. And it turns out that of all the things we looked at, there were two that were really indicators of whether they were successful in the workplace. And it was whether they said yes to these things. Number one, that they worked on a long-term project that lasted more than a few classes. And number two, that they applied what they were learning to solving a problem in the world. So you think about Hart leadership and everything that it's about. I mean, that literally could characterize Hart leadership in two key bullet points. Long-term engagement and applying it to something real in the world. And so we found this in research at Gallup. And it's exactly the cornerstone of the Hart Leadership Program. So all of you who are part of it, you literally couldn't be doing anything better for your future.
So much of your work involves publicly presenting Gallup's findings. What is that like?
So, well, I do a lot of public speaking. I probably have a keynote address or public speaking event once to twice a week, right? So, after, years and a decade and a half of doing this in my role, you start to get better at it every day, right? And you get more and more comfortable with it, but you still have the same nerves getting in front of an audience that you would in kind of any public speaking venue. That never goes away, right? So even if you become a professional at it, there's still that little element. But it's kind of a rule of 10,000 hours for me right now. I've probably, if I estimate it, I'm probably getting close to 10,000 hours of public presenting, whether it's a sales presentation, whether it's a keynote address, whether it's anything in between. And so it's one of those things that if you're a lifelong learner, you're always trying to figure out how you get better, how you do it differently than others. But what's been consistent about it is that you still have to have your voice in it, right? You have to be yourself as part of this. And so for me at least, I'm rarely ever scripted. I know the key bullet points that I want to say. I stay well informed, so I kind of know what I'm talking about by heart. And I'm very passionate about what I'm talking about. So it's not like I have to act and think about what my drama performance is going to be. I mean, I'm naturally interested in what I'm doing. I'm naturally excited about it. I eat, sleep, and drink it, so it's easy for me to kind of rattle off statistics and do that as part of it. But I think when you have all those things together, even the anxiety that happens every time, it just kind of falls by the wayside, because I love what I do, and I'm doing what I'm best at every day. So that's something pretty special. One of the things about being at Gallup is that when you're considered one of the world's best research firms, you have to do it well every single day, right? And the methodology of the studies that you work in has to be sound. How you report it has to be honest to the data. We obviously have opportunities from time to time to talk about what we think the data means and editorialize around it, but for the most part, we have to be very careful that what we're reporting is accurate and certainly fair. And so, I think that makes you work real hard. It makes you study a lot. I have high input, and I just love to soak up data and information and resources. So for me, reading research papers is actually fun and interesting, and but all through it, right, it's about trying to find the key points that are the real kind of sizzling insights, right? What are the piercing insights from this volume of data that you're sitting on? And so that really, if I think about my job, that's really it, is to go through a lot of stuff and help the world understand what's most important amidst everything that we know. A lot of our work at Gallup, in addition to our polling, just trying to help leaders get the premise right about what's happening, right? Education leaders, whether they're K-12 superintendents or college presidents. I mean, we're doing that kind of work, an ongoing panel of superintendents and college presidents where we're following the leaders in their thoughts about education, where it should head. We're doing public opinion polling about education, how Americans think about public schools, how they think about higher education, etc. But a lot of our work in terms of serving schools is in doing things like measuring student engagement and teacher engagement. So Gallup is easily the world's best organization in terms of measuring engagement in the workplace. It's probably the biggest element of the work we do, which surprises most people that only know us as a polling firm. But we measure employee engagement for most of the large companies in the world. We measure customer engagement for some of the best brands in the world. And we're bringing that expertise on kind of measuring emotional engagement into the classroom by measuring student engagement and teacher engagement. And there's a real clear connection. If you want to increase student engagement, you have to boost teacher engagement, their own workplace engagement. And this is true of K-12 teachers and also college faculty. And that hinges on whether you have a great leader, right? A great leader at the building level, the principal, or the university, the president and the deans. So we're involved in that kind of work. We also do strengths-based development, which is probably one of our strongest sciences here, helping individuals understand their innate talents and putting those to work every day so that they become strengths, right? So one of the critical questions to ask yourself in school and in whatever job you have is this: do I have the chance to do what I'm best at every day? It's not once a week, it's not once a month, it's not every now and then. If you can say yes, 5, strongly agree to that statement, I do what I'm best at every day, that's probably one of the most fundamental paths to success. So So those are examples of the kinds of things we do: strengths-based development, measuring engagement, and it's critical stuff that other organizations are, quite frankly, not doing, and they may be some of the best paths to success for students in schools. So we're really excited to be part of that work. There's a lot of efforts in education right now, both inside the academy, outside the academy, a booming education technology industry, more venture capital investments going into that than pretty much any industry right now. So there's just a lot of activity taking place. And I actually don't think that there's a huge distinction between being on the public side or the private side, or even within the government realm. I mean, they have different rules of engagement. But at the end of the day, I think the organization of the future is one where you won't be able to tell whether it's a nonprofit, a for-profit, or a government entity. In other words, it should equally be concerned with and good at self-sustaining revenue, right? An actual business model that matters, doing good and making impact from a social value perspective, and being thoughtfully engaged in policy. And we've always thought of those as three different sectors of society. They're not. They're blending, and they're getting more blended every day. We're going to get to a point where you won't be able to tell the difference, at least for the world-class ones. You won't be able to tell what they are by tax status. And so I always think about that from an organizational perspective, but also a personal one, is that I've been involved in starting a for-profit company that always had a social value mission to address binge drinking and sexual assaults on college campuses and in high schools. So we didn't have a double bottom line. It was one bottom line. If we didn't reduce binge drinking for our clients, they didn't pay us. It was a really simple model, right? And in many ways, Gallup is that way too. I mean, people don't know if this is a nonprofit, is it a for-profit company, and that's the way it should be if you're doing it right.
Biggest challenge in K-12 education?
We're looking at the whole world of education through a deficit-based lens.
Instead of a strength?
Every day we wake up, we think about this at a policy level, at a school level. We're trying to figure out what's wrong with schools, why our teachers are so ineffective, why kids, what kids don't know, right? I mean, our whole overzealous focus on standardized testing is essentially fueling that framework, right? We try and figure out what you don't know. And so I think that's it right there. We're trying to address education through a deficit-based lens. Even the people who are trying to solve the problem, some of them call themselves ed reformers. So just think of the mindset, right? No one wants to be reformed. If I'm a student, I don't want to be reformed. Teachers don't want to be reformed. I mean, we might need to redesign education. We'd certainly need to re-inspire people around education, but we don't need to reform anything. There's a lot of natural strengths out there. There's school models that have strengths, there's leaders that have strengths, and we need to get into that mindset of figuring out what people are good at and trying to get them into a pathway where they do that on a regular basis. So that's I think that's the critical distinction in K-12, and some of the biggest problems driving it are just that we've gone overboard on accountability. I'm a huge fan of accountability, but the way we've thought about accountability is largely, almost exclusively, through the lens of standardized testing. We need to have that be part of the process, but it can't be 100% of how we're evaluating schools and teachers and students.
Biggest challenge in higher ed?
Oh, higher ed has a value proposition challenge right now, which is crazy. I mean, it's the first time in American history that we're questioning the value of a college degree, and there's many reasons for it, right? Astronomical costs that have risen dramatically. Higher ed tuition has gone up about 250% in the last 18 years. That's outpaced healthcare costs by 2x in that same time frame, right? So we know we're going bankrupt as a country because of our healthcare tab. Higher education tuition has been twice the growth in cost of healthcare. So there's a lot of reasons for it. Obviously, new models of how people learn, online courses, free online courses, right? So if you can take every class at MIT for free right now, why get the degree? I mean, there's people actually asking that question, and certainly those of us who are staunch supporters of higher education believe very much in the experience, but we need to crystallize and quantify that value proposition in new and different ways than we have ever before. And it does require, in many ways, tweaks to the model as well. So I think the biggest challenge with higher education is that these are institutions steeped in tradition. The good and the bad is that they are shared governance models, right? So that's been a real strength of higher education in the past, but it's now also a weakness at a time when you have to make decisions quickly and decisively, and in this fast-paced changing environment. I think our governance models are a real challenge. We're seeing, discrepancies between boards and leaders and faculty on these important decisions. But whatever it is, we know the world is changing at a fast enough pace, so we've got to figure out how higher ed keeps pace with that right now.
How do you exercise leadership in DC's culture of authority?
Yeah, DC's an interesting town. I mean, I've only been here a year and a half, and quite frankly, I mean, even though I'm a public policy major from Duke, I've been really trying to stay out of the whole politics of DC, right? I haven't gotten, heavily involved in, Republican or Democratic Party activities. I haven't, gone out and, really started to be involved in stuff on the Hill. I mean, I'm doing it in different ways, right? So within the education world, I've tried to focus on the education thought leaders. So there are a lot of people here who maybe have a little bit of authority in terms of who they are, but they have a ton of influence because of their thought leadership. So their writing, their speeches, the work that they're engaged in, and so that's really the role that I've tried to play here, is a thought leader. And regardless of your title, regardless of your authority, your formal authority, I actually think that that the best part of being in DC is that you can have none of that and get to a place very quickly where a lot of people are listening, a lot of important people are listening, a lot of people who are in formal positions of authority are paying attention and influencing that. And so I take great pride in things like watching Arnie Duncan's speeches and then catching some points that I feel were influenced by research we did or work that we put out. And the same thing, the other day I had a really special moment where Steve Case retweeted one of my blogs, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, Steve Case tweeted my blog, right? So that's a great example of the kinds of stuff that happen in a city like DC. I mean, you can do that from anywhere, but DC has that special collection of interesting people, and so you just got to take advantage of it in any way you can. But I actually, I'm trying to purposely stay away from the formal, authoritative, kind of structures, and just be an influencer on the outside, and in and around the edges a little bit, which has been a lot of fun.
So you'd say that there is like an authentic social justice oriented community that exists outside of what we think of as political DC.
Oh yeah, there definitely is, and there's probably an overlap between those two worlds to some degree. There's people that are just hardcore in the middle of the politics, and others who are way on the kind of the social justice fringes of it, if you will, and everything in between. But that life exists here. You just got to be conscious again of where you are within that, right? You can easily get sucked into the vortex of DC in ways that are probably very unhealthy, just like you could in New York City or any other big town, but especially here, given the power and politics in town. But it's been a lot of fun so far.